Daniel was only 12, but his heart already carried the weight of a lifetime. Since the day he was born, he had never known stability. From the very beginning, he was placed into foster care, first as a baby, then as a toddler, and later as a young boy who had learned not to unpack his bag, because he never knew how long he would stay. Some homes were kind, filled with people who tried their best. Others were cold, more like shelters than families. But all had one thing in common: none of them were permanent. Each time he began to feel comfortable, each time he started to believe he could finally belong, the call would come, and Daniel would be moved again. He remembered lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of yet another strange bedroom, wondering why no one wanted to keep him. Why was it so easy to send him away? Why didn't anyone choose him forever? At school, Daniel kept to himself. He wasn't the kind of kid who caused trouble. He was quiet, polite, and always afraid of standing out. Some classmates thought he was shy, but the truth was that Daniel had learned an important rule. If you don't get too close, it doesn't hurt as much when people leave. Still deep inside, he longed for something simple, someone who would look at him and say, "You are mine, and I will never let you go." But he had stopped believing that was possible. At 12 years old, most children in foster care already knew the harsh truth. The older you get, the smaller your chances of adoption become. Daniel often asked himself in silence, would anyone ever want me? And then, one ordinary afternoon in the middle of a history class, everything began to change. But Daniel had no idea that his history teacher, Mr. Harris, was about to rewrite the story of his life in a way he could never imagine. If this part already touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and leave a comment below. Do you believe that family is something we're born into, or something we can choose? Mr. Harris had been teaching history at Lincoln Middle School for almost 15 years. He was known as the kind of teacher who made the past feel alive, turning dusty facts into stories of courage, resilience, and hope. Students respected him, and many even looked up to him as a mentor. But when he first noticed Daniel sitting in the back row, something about the boy caught his attention. Daniel never caused problems, yet he also never smiled. He completed his assignments quietly, kept his head down, and rarely raised his hand. To most teachers, he was just another quiet kid blending into the background. To Mr. Harris, though, there was something more. A silent loneliness that reminded him of a younger version of himself. One afternoon, after class had ended, Mr. Harris stopped Daniel as he was about to leave. "Hey, you did really well on that essay," he said with a warm smile. "Have you ever thought about writing more? You've got a real talent." Daniel froze. Compliments weren't something he was used to. He shrugged awkwardly, mumbling, "I guess." That small exchange might have seemed insignificant, but for Daniel it was rare. Someone had noticed him. And for Mr. Harris, it was the beginning of a quiet determination. This boy needed someone to believe in him. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Harris found little ways to connect. He'd ask about Daniel's day, encourage him to join class discussions, or simply give him an encouraging nod when he answered a question correctly. Slowly, Daniel began to look forward to history class, not just because of the lessons, but because it was the one place where he felt seen. Yet outside the classroom, Daniel's reality remained the same. His foster placement at the time was temporary, and whispers of another move had already started. Each night, as he packed his belongings into the small duffel bag he always kept ready, he wondered how much longer he'd get to stay. What Daniel didn't know was that Mr. Harris had already started asking questions. He had spoken with the school counselor, learning more about Daniel's background and the constant cycle of instability. The more he discovered, the more he felt a tug at his heart, a tug that whispered, "This boy deserves more. He deserves a chance." And one day that whisper would grow louder, becoming a decision that neither of them could have foreseen. But before that decision could be made, Daniel would face yet another painful turning point, one that would test his trust in the only person who seemed to care. The rumors Daniel had overheard became reality faster than he expected. One evening, his caseworker arrived with a familiar expression, the kind that meant his bags needed to be packed again. His current foster family had decided they could no longer keep him. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, clutching the worn-out duffel bag he carried from house to house. He wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come anymore. Moving had become routine. Each goodbye left a scar, but by now he had learned to hide the pain behind silence. The next morning at school, Daniel walked into history class with red-rimmed eyes. Mr. Harris noticed immediately. After class, he asked softly, "Daniel, are you all right?" For a moment, Daniel wanted to lie, to shrug it off like always. But something in Mr. Harris's voice felt safe. He whispered, "I have to move again." Those 4 words hit Mr. Harris like a punch to the chest. He looked at the boy standing in front of him, 12 years old but carrying the exhaustion of someone much older. In that instant, Mr. Harris knew he couldn't stand by and watch Daniel disappear into yet another temporary home. From that day forward, his role shifted. He was no longer just a teacher. He became a mentor, a steady presence Daniel could lean on. He started tutoring him after school, staying late to help with homework, and sometimes just listening when Daniel needed to talk. One evening, after a long tutoring session, Daniel hesitated before packing up his books. He looked at Mr. Harris and asked quietly, "Why do you care so much? I'm just another kid who's going to leave anyway." Mr. Harris leaned forward, his eyes steady. "You're not just another kid, Daniel. You're someone who matters. And no matter what happens, I'm here for you." For the first time in years, Daniel felt a flicker of hope. But hope was dangerous. It had betrayed him before. Could he really trust that this man meant what he said? The question lingered in Daniel's heart, even as their bond grew stronger with every passing day. But when the system threatened to move Daniel yet again, Mr. Harris realized that words weren't enough. If he truly meant what he said, he would have to prove it with the most life-changing decision of all. The call came late one afternoon. Daniel's caseworker informed him that another placement had opened up across town. By the end of the week, he would be moved again. When Mr. Harris heard the news, something inside him snapped. He had seen too many children shuffled from one house to another, always waiting for a family that never came. But this time it was different. This was Daniel. And the thought of watching him disappear into the system again was unbearable. That night, Mr. Harris sat at his kitchen table, staring at the adoption paperwork he had requested from the agency. The forms looked overwhelming, the process daunting. He was a single man, a teacher with a modest salary. Doubts whispered in his ear. What if I can't give him enough? What if I fail him? But then he thought of Daniel's quiet eyes, of the boy who had asked, "Why do you care so much?" He thought of the countless times Daniel had been let down, and he realized that failure would be walking away, not trying. The next morning, Mr. Harris made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He contacted the agency, officially beginning the process to adopt Daniel. When he finally told Daniel, the boy stared at him in disbelief. You want to adopt me?" His voice trembled, as if the words were too heavy to carry. "Yes," Mr. Harris said firmly. "I don't want you to move again. I don't want you to wonder if you belong. I want you to know without a doubt that you are my son." For Daniel, it felt like time had stopped. All the years of rejection, of never being chosen, crashed against the possibility that someone finally wanted him. Not temporarily, not conditionally, but forever. The process was not easy. There were background checks, home visits, endless paperwork, and long conversations with social workers. Some people doubted a single man could provide the kind of stability Daniel needed. But Mr. Harris never wavered. Each obstacle only strengthened his determination. And for the first time in his life, Daniel had something powerful to hold on to. Hope that this time, things might be different. But neither of them could have predicted the final emotional test, the day when the adoption would become official, and Daniel would finally discover what it meant to have a family forever. The day of the court hearing felt surreal for Daniel. He had imagined this moment countless times, but he had also learned not to get his hopes too high. Every time he dared to dream of a family, the dream had been snatched away. This time, though, something inside him whispered that it was different. As he sat in the waiting area of the courthouse, his heart pounded. His palms were sweaty, and he kept glancing at the clock. Mr. Harris sat beside him, calm but visibly emotional, occasionally placing a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Hey," Mr. Harris said gently. take a deep breath. Today isn't about losing anything. It's about gaining everything. Daniel looked at him, eyes wide, almost afraid to believe. But what if something goes wrong? What if they say no? Mr. Harris leaned closer, his voice steady. Daniel, listen to me. No matter what a piece of paper says, you're already my son. I chose you the moment I saw who you truly are. Today is just about making official what's already real. The words sank deep into Daniel's heart. For so long he had defined himself by the people who left him. And yet sitting there he realized that this man wasn't leaving. He was fighting to stay. Finally, their names were called. They walked into the courtroom, the sound of their footsteps echoing against the polished floor. The judge sat at the bench, reviewing a stack of papers. She looked up, her expression soft. The legal questions began. Background details, confirmations, procedures. But then came the moment that mattered most. The judge turned her gaze toward Daniel. Daniel, she asked, her tone gentle but firm, do you want Mr. Harris to be your father? The boy's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, but no words came out at first. His throat felt locked. He remembered every move, every goodbye, every time he had been told to pack his things. And now, for the first time, he had the chance to say he didn't want to leave again. Tears welled in his eyes. His voice trembled, but he managed to whisper, yes, more than anything in the world. A hush filled the courtroom. The judge smiled, lifted her pen, and signed the papers. Then it is official. From this day forward, Mr. Harris, you are Daniel's legal father. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. It felt like time itself had frozen. Then, as reality sank in, a flood of emotions overwhelmed him. He turned toward Mr. Harris, and before he could stop himself, he threw his arms around him. Mr. Harris held him tightly, whispering through his own tears, "Welcome home, son." Those words pierced through every scar Daniel carried. For the first time, he wasn't a foster kid. He wasn't temporary. He wasn't waiting for someone to love him. He was a son, chosen, wanted, and cherished. The weeks that followed were filled with firsts. Daniel decorated his room the way he wanted, putting posters on the walls without worrying about packing them up again. He unpacked his duffel bag for the last time, shoving it deep into his closet. "I don't need you anymore," he whispered to the bag, smiling for the first time in a long while. Dinner became a ritual. They cooked simple meals together, sometimes spaghetti, sometimes tacos, and laughed when they accidentally burned the toast. Mr. Harris helped him with homework, but he also taught him things no book ever could. How to ride a bike confidently, how to shake hands firmly, how to believe in himself. One night, while they were sitting on the couch watching an old movie, Daniel suddenly turned to him. Do you think my life would have been different if someone else had adopted me sooner?" Mr. Harris thought for a moment, then answered, "Maybe. But here's what I believe. Everything you went through, all the pain and waiting, it led you here, to me, to us. And I wouldn't change that for anything." Daniel let those words sink in. For years he had felt like the system had stolen his childhood. But for the first time he began to see his story not as one of loss, but of resilience, and of a love that had arrived at the perfect moment. Years later, Daniel would grow into a strong young man, carrying with him the lessons his father had given him. When asked about his past, he no longer spoke of being a foster kid. Instead, he spoke of the teacher who saw him, who believed in him, and who fought to make him his son. And perhaps the greatest irony of all was this. The history teacher who loved teaching about the past had ended up giving Daniel the future he had always dreamed of. Because in the end, family is not about blood or coincidence. It is about the people who choose to stay, who fight for us, and who love us without conditions. This story reminds us that sometimes the greatest heroes are the quiet ones, the teachers, the mentors, the people who see us when we feel invisible. If this story moved you, please like this video. Share it with someone who believes in second chances and tell us in the comments, do you believe love can rewrite destiny?